Today we're going to be talking about the advantages of choosing Fortaleza when comparing to the city of Rio de Janeiro. Hello there, my name is Luciano Oliveira. I am a Brazilian attorney. I'm here in Fortaleza, Ceará, and today we're going to be talking about the advantages of choosing Fortaleza to buy a real estate property when comparing to the city of Rio de Janeiro. The first advantage for Fortaleza, it's the cost of living. Rio de Janeiro is closer to São Paulo. They are in the south of the country, and that's where the most expensive items and lifestyle are. And Ceará, it's actually the opposite, is in the north part of the northeast of Brazil, and prices here are substantially lower. You can have access to many things comparable to what you see in Rio de Janeiro, but for a fraction of the price. To give an example, the same apartment you would buy in the city of Rio de Janeiro in an emerging neighborhood. I'm not talking about Ipanema, I'm not talking about Leblon, I'm just talking about an emerging neighborhood in Rio de Janeiro. You would probably buy a reasonable apartment for 1 million reais at least, which is roughly $200,000 today. A comparable apartment here in Fortaleza, you would probably buy for $60,000 or $70,000. It's substantially less. And also in terms of lifestyle, if you need to rent a car, even for long term, it's much more affordable here in Fortaleza. Services, goods, all types of things are going to be cheaper in Fortaleza. This said, Rio de Janeiro is a huge city, almost like 10 million people live in the city. So in Rio de Janeiro, you have access to like more international level services. You're going to find a much bigger variety of things that you may want to buy. And in Fortaleza, it's not rare for you to try to find something and to find out that this thing simply does not exist in Fortaleza. The upside is, prices are great. Your currency, it doesn't matter where you come from, is gonna give you more here in Ceará in general and Fortaleza as well. But on the other hand, you may not find everything that you need. The second thing is the growth potential. Rio de Janeiro, as you probably know, the city is compressed against the shoreline. So the main neighborhoods like Ipanema, Leblon, Copacabana, Joá, Gávea, or even Jardim Botânico, they have almost like completely built out. So, like to buy a property by the shoreline, you're going to be paying a lot of money. It's not rare to find a property selling by the shoreline for over $1 million, not a million reais, $1 million. In Fortaleza, you can still find properties by the shoreline, again, for a fraction of the price. And the reason is Ceará is still developing in terms of real estate, in terms of infrastructure. So it represents, in our opinion, a better investment opportunity for foreign citizens. So this leads to the next point, accessibility in general. In addition to offer like better pricing, Fortaleza is also less competitive. If you are in the real estate market and if you're trying to buy something by the shoreline, in addition to pay big bucks, you're also gonna be competing against many other foreign citizens, because foreign citizens, they have like a stronger currency. They are usually able to compete and to beat other interested parties in a certain property. But of course, this is going to come at a price. You're going to be usually overpaying the asked price when you're buying a property by the shoreline in these major neighborhoods in Rio de Janeiro. And in Fortaleza, although there is a large number of Europeans, Fortaleza and Ceará in general, they are not so well known in the United States, but in Europe, people absolutely know and love Ceará. But still, the number of foreign citizens or the financial capability, it's not the same as you see in Rio de Janeiro. So your access to the properties, to something more exclusive, is going to be much higher in Fortaleza and Ceará in general than it is when you are in Rio de Janeiro. In terms of leisure activities, there is also a strong difference difference between the two cities. Rio de Janeiro offers a more world-class international level of service, of restaurants, of experiences, and you pay the price tag for that. In Ceará, it's something more laid back. So there are very good restaurants, there are lots of options for leisure, there are amazing places to visit, and usually they are not gonna be so service intensive. When you are in Rio de Janeiro, usually you're gonna go to a club, to a show, or you're gonna go in a certain attraction that you're gonna pay to enter that attraction, and then you're gonna pay additional if you wanna do anything inside. So everything is gonna have a price tag in Rio de Janeiro. It is what it is. Rio de Janeiro is also an amazing city. In Ceará and Fortaleza and all the other cities in Ceará, on the other hand, access is usually gonna be free, and you're gonna get more for whatever you're doing in terms of leisure. It's a different style, a different experience, and the advantage for Fortaleza is probably in the variety of things you have to do and the lower cost for those things. In Rio de Janeiro, it's a more concentrated set of options for you to choose from, and in Fortaleza, it actually expands to like some smaller cities around Fortaleza, as Beberibe, as 14, as Aquiraz, where there is the world famous beach park, one of the largest water parks in the world. And there is just a lot to be done here in Fortaleza, and again, for prices much lower than what you see in Rio de Janeiro. Another thing worth mentioning is in terms of violence and crimes. Unfortunately, Rio de Janeiro is one of the top positions in those rankings. And Fortaleza, of course, is not free of problems with violence and crime, but it's absolutely not comparable to Rio de Janeiro. So if you have heard a story from a friend who was mugged in Rio de Janeiro or who had like property stolen, chances of something like that happening in Ceará and Fortaleza are much lower. Again, I'm not saying it's not existing. There is also violence and crimes in Fortaleza and Ceará, but for sure, people feel safer in Fortaleza and Ceará than they feel in Rio de Janeiro, São Paulo, or probably any other city as big as Rio de Janeiro. Another concern is a cultural aspect of Rio de Janeiro. To try to explain what I'm talking about, out of the 10 last governors in Rio de Janeiro, 5 were sent to jail because of corruption charges. There may be something related to political disputes. You never know the whole story. But the reality is that corruption is really high in Rio de Janeiro, and maybe this kind of permeates the society at some level. I'm not saying everybody is corrupt, of course that's not the case, but in Fortaleza, on the other hand, Fortaleza is known for one of the highest levels of transparency in the government in the entire country. So there is a really substantial difference in terms of government and general style for these two societies that I would say it's in favor of Fortaleza. Finally, let's talk about climate. Rio de Janeiro is towards the south of the country. Fortaleza is in the northeast. Again, it's in the north part of the northeast of Brazil. Weather is more stable in Fortaleza throughout the year. There are no substantial differences between the winter and the summer, as you would see in Rio de Janeiro. In Rio de Janeiro, during winter, you actually experience some level of cold, probably around the 50s. It could be even like the upper 40s in Fahrenheit. And in Fortaleza, you don't experience such temperatures like in the 40s or even in the 50s. It's something more stable between like the upper 60s and the lower 90s. So it's a very amenable climate, and this would probably be in favor of Fortaleza as a choice as well. Well, these are just some of the aspects that you can see some clear distinctions between Fortaleza and Rio de Janeiro. I hope this video was helpful, and follow us for more.